Hey guys, welcome to the show today. Thank you for tuning in. We have an exciting conversation with my friend Pastor Tim Thompson of 412 Church Murrieta. I released a message that Pastor Tim gave me the opportunity to preach there recently on the podcast, and then several months ago you probably listened to the episode from Our Watch, his Wednesday night program, where they bring in guests who are contending and fighting in the public square on behalf of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and our constitutional republic. And so we have Pastor Tim in studio today here at our studio to discuss his story, what he and his church have done to fight for life and to fight for this country. And I want to just share it with you because there are so few pastors still in this moment who are willing to put it all on the line, to leave it all out on the field, and to care more about truth, the unborn, liberty, and the freedom of the next generation before their own reputation in the community. And Pastor Tim has been a real pillar in Murrieta in Southern California for quite some time and has really come against the culture of death and those seeking to prey upon and indoctrinate our children with radical sexual ideologies in order to create more unborn children who become prospects for abortion. Pastor Tim understands all of this and has discipled his congregation to be able to stand in this Kairos moment. Buckle up, you won't want to miss it. I'm Seth Gruber, and this is Unaborted. Well, Pastor Tim, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me out.
Absolutely. You have had me out twice now, and what an honor it's been to just be with your people. Someone who travels a lot, the biggest joy and gift is the people.
Right.
You get to meet so many different new people. And your congregation, you and your wife, your team has been just incredibly gracious to me, to my family. And we're sensing, I think, a stirring happening, not just in the country, but in the state of California as well.
Right.
And seeing people unite and how God's bringing people together in order to be able to fight and contend. But that's nothing really new to you. You've been doing that for a lot longer than the recently awakened pastors who were like, oh, I got to get political now because I'm being told I can't even keep my church open.
Right.
And so you've been an example of a man who's put aside the attacks of being a political hack in order to pursue righteousness in the public square. But firstly, share your story with us. How did you become a pastor? Where did you come from? Where did you grow up? And how did God bring you into the pulpit?
Yeah, I'm the oldest of 8 children.
Oh, awesome.
And so abortion was clearly never an option for our family. In fact, my mom was so intent about, wanting to have children that, like, for her, even birth control, nothing. She, like, for her, look, we're going to have as many kids as God will bless us with. Awesome. And God blessed them with 8. And I've been just...
You're a big brother, though.
I'm a big brother to them, and I love each and every one of them. And we all live in the same area.
All of you still?
All of us still.
Oh, wow. What a gift.
Raised by godly parents. We all live in the same area. We all think alike. We all vote alike. We're that weird family that looks forward to Thanksgiving and the conversations we're going to have. So, for me, I was raised knowing the Lord. I did my little time of rebellion, but thankfully that was short-lived. Good. But I always knew the Lord, and I was raised to know the Lord. That whole train up your children in the way they should go. When they get older, they're not going to depart. And I didn't ever truly depart. I did my little rebellion, but thankfully, right after that little time of rebellion, met my wife, got married, and she saw in me at first that I was going to be a pastor. God told her before He told me. So, God brought us into the ministry, and it's been kind of a weird time, especially over the last 10 years for me, because about 10 years ago was when I started getting involved in the political arena. And I don't run for office personally. And I think it's awesome. Some pastors do. But for me, I just see my role a little bit different. But I got offered a trip to the nation's capital. And I was real excited about that because I love America. I'm a patriot. I love America. I think it's an amazing country. I've traveled the world as a missionary. Prior to being a senior pastor, I was a missions pastor. And I know America is an incredible country. And so I thought, okay, I'll go this trip. And I found myself in the office of a man named Ken Calvert. And I'm sitting in his office, and really I don't know who he is. And don't really know why I'm there. I just know that the people that organized the trip said, hey, we're going to tour you around, show you the religious, heritage of America. Right. But we want to set up some meetings for you when you're there. Okay, no problem. And Ken Calvert asked me, he says, hey, do you have any questions for me? And literally in my mind, I was thinking, I want to ask this man, who are you and what do you do? And what I realized was this is not just Ken Calvert. This is Congressman Ken Calvert. He's my congressman. I have no clue who he is. And I've, as a pastor, have said these very generic prayers because the Bible tells us to pray for all who are in authority, that we can live quiet and peaceful lives unto the Lord. Well, I had preached that. I had prayed very generic prayers. And what God challenged me with in that moment was, Tim, I've told you to pray for those who are in authority. This man is in authority over your region where you live. You have no clue who he is. You don't know his name. You don't know what he does. You don't know what struggles he has. And God challenged me. You need to know these people. You need to know who the 5 members are of the school board that are making decisions for the children in your congregation and your children and your future grandchildren. I had no clue who these people were. So I got back from D.C. and immediately I'm like, okay, I'm going to know who these people are. I'm going to know their prayer requests. I'm going to know their struggles. And I'm going to know if they have faith in the Lord or claim to have faith. And that's what I did. I got back and I got a member of my congregation who was kind of like-minded in that. And I said, I want you to call all the school districts in our area, which is 5 school districts. Call each and every one of them. And I said, I want you to ask them about issues that we can dig in on. I said, I don't want issues about the border. I don't want, and I have strong feelings about the border, but I don't want to cause a division within the church unnecessarily. So I don't want to know about, firearms, stuff like that. Again, very strong feelings, but I want to know about sexuality. I want to know about issues of life. For me, if I stand in front of my congregation and I say that abortion is wrong and it divides the congregation, oh well.
Truth does that.
That's the thing. It's like I'm okay with that kind of division. If there's people that think it's okay, well then you're in the wrong place. So we dug in, and man, what we found was incredibly disturbing.
Wow. And so when did you find out what was in your schools? Was it like within months of coming back from DC and having this political awakening?
Oh yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So this was, we're talking then.
Yeah, a decade ago.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, we started digging in, and
this is still Murrieta, right?
Murrieta, yeah. So Southern California, Riverside County, which Riverside County, it's kind of going purple, but Riverside County still, as far as Southern California is concerned, still a very conservative area, and a lot of people are moving into that county, attempting to change it from within, which we know that's kind of the blueprint of the liberals, but. I've been there since '86, and we've grown. I grew up there, raised my kids there. I've got a grandchild due in January now. So I mean, I was raised there, raised my kids there. Now I got another generation coming up, and so we started digging in. And I'm sure you're familiar with AB 329 here in California. That was the California Healthy Youth Act, and when that hit, when that got voted in, signed into law by our governor. That was like opening Pandora's box because that really started to expose all the things that were taking place in the public school system. Wow. And it was incredibly, again, disturbing.
This is significant too, because we're not talking about like some district in New York City or Berkeley. Right. We're talking about Riverside. Right. We're talking about sort of Inland Empire area, which for those of you guys who listen around the country, this is like just east of South Orange County or San Diego County, and not really where the left loves to go live. I mean, that's where more conservative middle-income Americans like to go to buy a home that they can't afford in Newport Beach. Right. And you got some higher income in nice areas as well, but it's hotter, the weather's a little more extreme, and that tends to just be more conservative. I mean, the coastal California tends to be all crazy leftists. So this is not like some Bay Area city. This is like Riverside, Murrieta. And what did you find?
Well, with the California Healthy Youth Act, which I love how the left labels these things. It is anything but healthy. We started digging into the curriculum.
Just follow the science, Tim.
That's one thing. We as we dug in, we know that what the law says. It says that these things have to be taught medically accurate. You know, when we started looking into what they're teaching kids to do, it's, you know, they're telling them how to do these things in a healthy way, which, sodomy, things like that, which there is nothing healthy about that. There is no healthy way to do that because it's not a healthy act. So, we started digging into what they were teaching, and it basically, it's all geared around making sure that children are sexualized at a very early age and are very well aware of their right to abort the child when they get pregnant.
That's right.
That's what it's geared around, is sexualizing. And you think about what's being talked about. Some of these things, I won't even mention it on your program, but let's just say, as a pastor, I've said things, because I've talked about what's in the curriculum, I've said things I never, even as a non-believer, even as a person who was in a time of rebellion, I didn't even talk about these things then. And now as a pastor, I'm having to talk about this stuff because this is the reality of what's being taught to our children. I never thought these things would come out of my mouth.
Right.
It's incredibly wicked and incredibly disgusting, really.
And you know what a lot of pastors will say about these types of conversations, Tim? And it makes me angry to even discuss the reaction of many pastors to this content. But the reaction and response of so many pastors who learn about this, unlike yours, is that's inappropriate. That's offensive. That's wrong to talk about in church, Tim. That's the response of like a lot of Christians and pastors when they, if they even learn about this type of content. And what a inverted, perverted response to that.
Right.
To be like, oh, that offends my moral sensibilities. It's like, well, what do you think it does to the kid?
Right.
What do you think that's doing to the kid at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11? Exposing them to anything and everything, leaving no sexual stone unturned. Because the belief of these people, Pastor Tim, is that children have a right to sexual pleasure, which means they also have a right to know everything about sex in order to exercise their quote-unquote sexual rights. Oh, it offends you as the pastor? Oh, I'm so sorry that offends you. What do you think it's doing to the sheep in your city? And so that's why I'm such a fan of you, brother, because your response is, well, we have to talk about this now because we abdicated our role for so long.
Right.
And other people took in charge of these institutions of political office and power, and they put in their ideas into the curriculum. Now, unfortunately, we have to talk about it because we have to stand up for the children.
Right.
So your response seems so to me and to the listeners of this show, but it's not to many people. No. They say, keep that out of the church, just preach the gospel. Well, you know what? I guess the Good Samaritan, the parable of the Good Samaritan, didn't do a good job because he didn't just bend over and preach the gospel. He helped the bleeding victim. Someone was in need of help. Rather than leaning over to him and saying, repent, for the kingdom of God is near, he actually cared for him.
Right.
And so what does that look like in a political system where we, the people, are the sovereign? Well, it means caring for people before they're abused.
Right.
Getting rid of the curriculum to protect the children. So.
Right, yeah. I mean, you look at, and I love that you said that as far as, oh, we'll just preach the gospel. Do you know how many times I've heard that over the last several years? Yep. We just preach the gospel. You shouldn't be talking about politics. I seem to remember Paul saying, I haven't shunned to declare to you the whole counsel of God's word. The whole counsel. The gospel, yes, important, imperative. It has to be preached. You need to hear it. But there's a point in time where once you've heard the gospel and you accept the gospel and you have the Spirit of God in you, now you got to dig into all the other areas of God's word and go, okay, what does God's word say about the culture I'm living in? Because one of the things that the radical left knows about us as pastors is that all you got to do is call us a name and we get our feelings hurt and we clam up. We won't say anything. Oh, you're a racist, you're a bigot, you're a misogynist, you're a homophobe, you're a xenophobe. They throw these things our way and then we just we just clam up because we don't want to be seen as those things. Yeah. So we start to just shy away from what has been deemed political. And another thing that the radical left does is because they know this about us as pastors, they then politicize biblical moral issues.
They politicize everything, yeah.
Everything's politicized. So then when you talk to pastors and go, well, pastors shouldn't be talking about politics. Well, now, you can't talk about the border, even though God's the one who from one blood has made all people and has determined the boundaries of their inhabitants.
That's right.
So you can't talk about that. You can't talk about life. Can't talk about marriage, can't talk about sexuality. I mean, you start listing it out, the things that have been politicized that now pastors go, well, I can't talk about it. It's political.
Yeah.
Well, then what are we going to talk about?
Yeah.
Well, just give them the gospel. Yeah, I get that, but how do we address the culture? How do we talk about abortion in the church? And I've talked to pastors who go, well, I don't bring that up in my sermons. Well, why not? Well, there might be a woman sitting in my congregation who's had an abortion, and I don't want her to walk away from church feeling bad. And
I've heard that so many times.
Here's like newsflash, Pastor. You don't have to worry about her feeling bad if you bring up that it's a sin. She already feels bad.
Yeah.
She's already broken. She's already hurting. What she needs to hear is that's not a sin that God can't forgive.
Yeah.
And now you bring in the restoration and the healing that God can bring through his son Jesus. That's what she needs to hear.
That's right. My colleague Mike Spencer says that pastors' silence on abortion reveals that they either don't believe that the gospel is all that good, or they don't believe abortion is all that bad, or both. Because either you won't touch it because you just don't think it's that bad, right? Or you're not willing to share the beauty of the gospel to the broken men and women in your congregation whose pain on abortion is the very reason you should talk about it, in order to remind them that while they arranged the murder of their own child, Jesus is just as eager to forgive the sin of abortion as any other sin. But the point is, is that we've allowed the other side to define the terms of engagement.
Right.
Oh, that's political, Pastor Tim. Hey, remember separation of church and state. Just preach the gospel, okay? And some of these major big evangelicalism organizations are funded through different various sort of George Soros entities that are sort of connected to him. You have to kind of start wondering, why are you really being silent?
Right.
And the point is that the early feminists have had their goal realized. The early feminists of the 60s said that the personal is the political. So they wanted to politicize everything that was formerly just personal issues. What's political about killing babies in the womb? What's political about marriage? Well, it's the smallest political unit, the family, so in a way it is. But what's political about chopping off the genitalia of an 8-year-old boy because he played with a Sally doll once and he thinks he's a girl now? They politicized every sort of individual, cultural, personal issue, and then they masquerade all of their evil bigotry as it's just politics, it's just political science.
Right.
And don't worry, we have the science of the universe, and we can perfect all of these issues by applying our policies. Just trust us with political power. You just keep preaching the gospel, Tim. And then pastors cave, and they abdicate their duty in order to be perceived as non-political in the community. But you and I know in America, there's no such thing as not being political, because the people are the ones who are responsible for the direction of the country. The elected representatives serve at our pleasure and our consent. So we're more powerful than the politicians, which means that we actually bear more responsibility for the direction of the country. So in virtue of being an American, you are political, in virtue of being here and being an American. So there's no such thing as not being political, but that's what they try to do to keep us silent. So anyways, let's circle back. What did you and your church do about what you started to find in the schools?
The first thing we did was we found out that curriculum was being released. So the way it worked was AB 329 passed, but like the radical left does, they let it pass and they do nothing at first because everybody gets in an uproar. Oh my gosh, did you hear what they're going to do? And then all of a sudden nothing happens, and then people go, okay, well, I guess it's okay. Then they the whole time they're developing curriculum, and then they start to release the curriculum out. Well, people have forgotten that AB 329 passed. Well, now a couple years later, curriculum starts coming out. And we asked one of the local school districts, it's a city just north of us, we said, hey, so what do you have going on, sex ed stuff? And they, we're going to be releasing the curriculum, and we're going to let the parents come and take a look. And we said, okay, well, how many parents usually show up to something like this? They said, well, about 25 parents. And we're looking, okay, this is a school district that has thousands of students. 25 parents show up? I'm like, this is not good. So what I did was I sent out a blast to every pastor in the city, every single one. And I said, okay, here's what's going on. They're releasing the sex ed stuff. Only 25 parents come out. I need you to announce this to your church. I need you to bring your church out to it. Parents have to hear what's going on. And lo and behold, they had a Planned Parenthood nurse give the presentation.
Shocker.
Shocker, So
It's a day that ends in Y.
Yeah. So we show up at this, and I was very disappointed because 2 other pastors showed up.
Wow.
And I mean, I sent this to probably 30 pastors in the area. 2 other pastors showed up, and then after that, only one of those pastors actually continued to try to engage in this. The other one was like, you guys are too, this is too extreme. You're being extreme, and it's like, well, have you seen
read the
curriculum? Extremeness of this curriculum? I mean, it was just so wicked. So
Yeah.
I was thankful though, where normally there's about 25 parents. The school district had to scramble because they did not expect what showed up. We had about 160 parents show up. This was kind of, this was just.
Did you help rally?
Yeah. I mean,
Awesome.
I basically, when we were there, the 2 other pastors, they didn't bring any members of their congregation. Wow. They didn't even want to announce it because it's political. Right. They didn't even announce it. They just showed up. Yeah. But
wow.
My congregation showed up, and they kind of put word out. So we had 160 people there, and they had to scramble, pull out chairs, and they just were not prepared.
Amazing.
But one of the things that was interesting to me in that, because my wife at the time worked for the Murrieta School District, she said, "Hey, look at those 2 people over there. I know them." Well, they were administrators from Murrieta that were there trying to watch how this went. So that way they could kind of scope it out, so that way when they release it to their parents, they know how it went in the city just north of them. So there was definitely some strategy going on there to see how this is going to play out. And when I saw what they released and how they were acting like it was no big deal, this was at the time the big thing. Have you heard of the genderbread man?
Yes.
Yeah, it's like it looks like a gingerbread, but it's the genderbread.
That's right.
Man. So it's like on all the little, male parts, female parts, and those things can, and then the head, the heart,
your identity,
the genitalia, and so
you might have this part, but you could be this identity.
Right. So that was in there. That was in the curriculum that was coming out, and of course all the sexual rights of the child, the privacy rights of the child, the ability to leave campus, get an abortion without parental knowledge or consent. All of that was in there.
Yep.
And we just kept digging. Well, we ended up finding out that there was a series of instructional conferences for the administrators of schools.
Okay.
And so we go, okay, well, we want to go and check this out. And we went to one, and when we were in it, it just became so abundantly clear what their agenda was. I mean, the person who was the person we thought was a woman ended up being a man, but that person was instructing this group,
wow.
And everything they were talking about was how you can implement the opt-out form for parents in a way that is ambiguous, so that way the parents can't actually opt their kids out
of the sex
ed stuff. And it was, it just was so clear. We couldn't believe it. It was one of those things where, because of the area we live in, it being such a conservative area, the area of Temecula, Murrieta, that whole corridor of Southern California, it used to be known as the Bible Belt of Southern California.
Wow.
There's churches everywhere.
Awesome.
We just wouldn't expect that they would literally be trying to implement something in a way where the parents wouldn't have a right to know these things or pull their kids out of these things. They were saying, we need to make sure that the kids get taught these things. And one of the people said, well, what if the parent finds out afterwards and is mad? And you know what the person's response was? Who cares? We taught it to them anyway.
Wow.
Their attitude is, we just need to make sure we get this in the minds of the children. As long as we do that, who cares? Parents can get mad all they want.
Yeah. Now, you did some undercover exposing what you just talked about, is that right?
Right.
That's right. And we have a video that we want to show from your team and your church's undercover work as stewards, as Ezekiel watchmen, blowing the trumpet, saying, this is what is already here. And that's why, for you guys listening, this is why I wanted to bring Pastor Tim on, to expose you to pastors who stand, who care more about truth. God tells Ezekiel that if you see the swords of the enemy coming and you do not blow the trumpet, and the people are not warned, and any of them are taken away or killed, they are taken away in their iniquity, but their blood I will require at the watchman's hand. It's a scary, scary verse. And you and your church are trumpet blowers and you're watchmen.
Right, it's
and
our
so
watch.
Here is what you found out while you were on the building watching what was happening. So let's play this.
Yeah, because there's a lot. They're going to talk about opt-in, opt-out today. So, that, and also the rights of students for leaving the campus to have some medical attention concerning certainly pregnancies. So, but I think it's other things too. Because I don't know the rules too. That's all new to me. My name is Mike Marty. I'm the Executive Director of Instructional Services. So, of course, this is a health-focused area, so it falls under instructional services. We've been very fortunate to partner with Kara Services. They have a grant to provide these kinds of networks throughout California. It's all about the ed code and the facts, so realize there's some perspectives, but it is, the ed code is pretty clear that it's about the facts and not about something. And so they try to do that. There's some, today I think there's going to be some law that's going to be talked about, so that'll be clear. They'll be very, they tend to be always very clear on the law.
Again, my name is Adriana Rodriguez. This is Tim Thompson. I work out of our San Bernardino office. So always in the area and available to chat. Okay, so I guess let's get started. Regardless of how old the student is, they can walk into a doctor's office and consent to these services without parental consent. Those services are pregnancy and prenatal care, contraception and emergency contraception, abortion, and so for these, there's no parental notification. I think a good way to think about all of these are just services that California has decided are so important that we're going to allow minors to be able to go into a doctor's office and consent to these services because they're just that important, and students really need to be able to access them. And they're very sensitive in terms of a lot of times students don't want to talk to their parents or guardians about these kinds of issues.
But it's those who can't, right, who are in dangerous situations, who are going to have their college tuition taken away, who are maybe experiencing abuse at home, right, that need to have that barrier cleared for them.
Young people have the right to leave school to seek confidential medical services without the consent or notification of their parents or guardians. And I think the key thing to remember here is that when you're thinking about confidential medical release, the right belongs to the young person. So it doesn't belong to the parent, it doesn't belong to the school. The right lies with the young person. The most important piece of this is that schools cannot share this information with parents or guardians. Also, no parent call. So a teacher or the attendance office can't call home and say, so-and-so was out at, the doctor's office receiving X. Did you know about this? Cannot do that.
Some districts do things like they'll say, oh, the student was with an administrator at this time, and that administrator, they won't answer further questions. It's a little tricky though, which is why it's kind of more of an art than a science, and there are a few different ways to do it, right? It can't say the student was in class just like every other day, right? Because that's not true to the law for reimbursement reasons. Which is why we think kind of the best option is something that is amorphous, doesn't disclose that that person was off campus having a medical appointment. But saying it's an excused absence does not directly violate the law.
And instruction has to teach students about gender, gender expression, gender identity, and explore the harm of negative gender stereotypes. It is not only bias-free, but it is affirmatively inclusive of those folks and relationships. Schools may not facilitate a selective opt-out, just
of the queer stuff, just of the LGBTQ stuff in sexual health education. We've heard a lot of parents, unfortunately, who say, I really want my kid to learn sex ed. It's important. However, none of the gay stuff. They can't do that. So schools may not facilitate the selective opt-out of lessons that are focused on LGBTQ content by parents or guardians whose students are otherwise in the classroom for other sex ed instruction. Practically, it should be impossible, because the idea with CHIA is that LGBTQ people and relationships are interwoven into the entire curriculum, right? It's not like on day 3 you learn about queer people and everything else is straight people. That's not how it works, right? And so opting out just of the LGBTQ stuff is illegal and should be also impossible.
Well, isn't that lovely?
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, we had my friend Monica Klein on the show for the second time recently. That you guys watched this episode, I'm sure. It was just called Exposing the Twisted History of Sexual Education in America. Because the groups who have been responsible for writing much of this curriculum, that this ACLU attorney, for you guys listening on audio, by the way, that woman you heard talking was an ACLU attorney. The type of curriculum that she's discussing to these administrators, all of this sex ed curriculum was typically developed by like one of 3 organizations. You have Answer, you have Advocates for Youth, and you have the Sexuality Information Education Council of the United States, or SECUS. And these were all spawned from Planned Parenthood. Mary Calderon, the former medical director for Planned Parenthood, left Planned Parenthood in the 60s to start SECUS with seed money from Hugh Hefner, with one of her board members, a man named Wardell Pomeroy, who used to be the director of the Kinsey Institute at Indiana University, which performed sexual experiments on young people and timed their orgasms with a stopwatch. That's where all this sex ed comes from. And so when she's talking about this sex ed curriculum, these are the type of, but they just call it health, right? It's just sex health education. Right. It's just science, follow the science, Fauci science, the science of men are women and women are men, the science of unborn children are not persons. Doesn't sound very scientific, Tim, but this is the kind of things that you guys actually exposed. Right. So let's talk about some of that. Unbelievable. Yeah. Sounds like she's coaching administrators in schools how to navigate the legal waters of avoiding lawsuits while preventing parents from being involved in the process of what she literally referred to was their own child's pregnancy.
Right. Yeah. And so one of the things she says right at the beginning is any child at any age. And that was to me like, what are you talking about at any age? So they're saying any child, any age can leave campus and go and get these things.
Emergency contraception, which is the morning after pill, which is an abortifacient. Or she said an abortion.
Right. So another thing she did was refer to us parents as barriers. That's another thing that when I first started digging into this, I didn't even know what they were talking about. What's the barrier? And I found out, it's parents and guardians, pastors. We're all barriers to them experiencing and enjoying themselves sexually.
Because they know that the parents and pastors would recognize that their science is nothing but a sticker that they slap over their bigotry in order to hide their true agenda.
Right. And then, when you look at what she was coaching them how to do is, let's coach you how to do a couple of things. Number one, how to lie to the parents, but how to do this in a way that we still get reimbursed. In other words, we want the federal funding for the school district. We don't want to lose money.
Right. Don't want to get in trouble.
God forbid we lose money because a child was out getting an abortion. We want them to get the abortion, but we want our money too. So how can you, as a school administrator, a school district employee, how can you ensure the child gets the abortion, but make sure that the parent doesn't know? So, and I don't know if you caught it. She says it's more than an art than a science. So this is an art. Lying about where the children are is an art form that the schools have to figure out. So, we need to figure out how to lie to parents, hold this information back, and it's a sad thing because in our region, I know this is happening all over the place, but in our region, this is taking place. There's I'm on the board for Birth Choice, which is a local pro-life pregnancy center, and they got a call one day from somebody who found this girl on the side of the road crying. What had happened was the principal of the school paid for a cab, had the girl dropped off at the abortion center. She didn't go in. She just sat on the curb crying. So a member of the community found her and then brought her to Birth Choice.
My God.
And
That's right. You told me this.
And no trouble. The
the
principal gets in zero trouble. Why? Because it's his responsibility to keep that private for the child. Unbelievable. And the community I live in, because it has been for so long so conservative, the Bible Belt of Southern California, you start telling parents, this is what's happening. You know what the parents say? Not in our school district.
Yeah, yeah.
Or not at my school. That would never fly. I've talked to the principal. He would never do that.
Wake up.
But these things are absolutely happening in our
Now,
community.
you can't get Advil or ibuprofen in a elementary, junior high, or high school, Tim, without parental consent. You can't go on a field trip without parental consent and a signed document.
Unless it's to the abortion center.
Yeah. You can take a field trip to the abortion center to kill your parent's grandson without parental consent. And not just that, but the high priests of secular progressivism will coach schools on how to ensure that parents don't find out. And my friend Monica Klein has said many times that when she was at Planned Parenthood as a sexual educator, one of the phrases that Planned Parenthood officials and trainers would throw around all the time was the phrase, parents are a barrier to service. And so you began to learn that this is how they view parents as well. And so the question becomes, is if this is happening in conservative Riverside County, then what should we assume is happening in our public schools in Berkeley, in San Francisco, in Los Angeles Unified School District, right? And now we're seeing the ramp up attacks against parents, which is why Attorney General Merrick Garland, who's this pissed off lawyer because he was denied a seat on the highest court in the land by Mitch McConnell, is now labeled parents domestic terrorists who are showing up, yes, angry, but not resorting to violence, but showing up and verbally expressing their outrage and anger at school boards in these viral clips all around the country. Why? For two reasons: the critical race theory they're teaching and the crazy sexual education they're teaching. Those are really the only two reasons why parents are showing up in mass in school boards all around the country right now. Merrick Garland doesn't like that, so he labels them domestic terrorists. What was happening last school year when the shutdowns were still going on and students were in school? You had several stories come out from around the country where the teacher was telling students via Skype or Zoom to make sure that the parents weren't in the room. Well, why would you be concerned about that? Because they see the parents as a barrier. And this has been sort of the direction of the left's political attacks and positioning for so many decades, Pastor Tim, as you well know, is that you have to separate children from parents because the family is the foundational building block of the society. It's the smallest political unit. And parents, especially opposite sex parents in a married relationship, living together in a low conflict marriage, that increases human flourishing. Children fare best when raised by their married biological parents in a low conflict home, which means that these children will be less susceptible to the lies of the left's political regime and the political project. And what have been communist regimes' goals always? To get children into state schools, to be indoctrinated with state education, and even encouraging students to whistleblow on their own parents and report them to the communist regime. We're just seeing the small attempts of that, but we're seeing the fast tracking of the consequences of it because we've abdicated for so long. So wild stuff that you and your congregation are exposing.
Yeah, I really couldn't believe it. I mean, as a pastor, like when I became a pastor 18 years ago, and I never thought at that time, like, someday we're going to go undercover and we're going to catch our school district doing these things. Like, I never thought that that's what I would be doing, but the second we found out that these things were happening, I go, we got to get into this next training they're doing, and we got to catch this on film. Why? Because I was trying to tell parents, and they didn't believe me. Like, this is happening. Oh, no, it's not happening. Yes, it's happening. Then we got the film. We went undercover, got the film. They still didn't believe me. I mean, we started to kind of break ground with some other parents, but there was still a vast majority of parents wouldn't believe it was happening. So then we did a FOIA demand on the the County Board of Education to get all the documentation surrounding what they were doing. And what we uncovered with that was that hundreds of thousands of dollars were being spent to have companies come in and train the school district employees how to do this. Hundreds of thousands of dollars just in that year, just in that county, and that same company that was doing it across the state. We looked on their website. They just had training seminars set up. I mean, their calendar was full the whole year, and you know,
because the left does a good job, Pastor Tim, at training their troops.
Mhm.
Their weapons are well sharpened. Their troops are well trained.
Right.
And what would make their day, their greatest hope, their dream, is that those Christians just keep their liturgy in the church.
Right.
You keep your gospel in the church, Christians. You talk about Jesus and worship him all you want, but don't you take that faith out into the public square.
Right.
Don't you begin to contend in the ecclesia. Because why? Because then our political project and regime will start being threatened by the mama bears and the papa bears, by the first and most formative influence in the lives of children, the people who created them. And that's the greatest fear of this regime and of this movement. But you also discovered, as we start to wind down here, Pastor Tim, you discovered, it's almost funny, but it's not. It's just like, it's so blatant that it's hard to not laugh at it. And that is some of the names that these organizations give themselves.
Right.
That like when you study it, you're like, are you trying to tell us what you're about and what you're into? But one of those is named Cardia.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about what you guys learned about this organization through your work?
Yeah, when we saw all the different invoices, because we did a FOIA demand, and for your viewers that don't know what FOIA is, it's Freedom of Information Act.
That's right.
So the idea is we as citizens have the right to the documentation. That information is ours. We own it. So give us all, we want everything surrounding this. And what we found was all of these invoices to Cardia. We're like, what is Cardia? And I looked at the name of it, and it was CARDEA. Because I'm thinking, it sounds like cardia, like cardio, something to do with heart. Right. And you know, California, healthy. I'm thinking, okay, heart health. Well, I don't know. But that doesn't look right, the spelling. So I looked up Cardia, CARDEA. And what I found was that this was an ancient Roman goddess associated with hinged Roman doors. And I'm like, oh, well, hinged Roman doors, what is this about? But the more I looked at what this goddess does, is it controls what's able to come in and come out, and it sets boundaries. So I started looking at what they're doing with the public school system, and they want boundaries. They're like, the public school system is ours. Right. We do not want parents in here. Let's keep them out. And let's set the boundary. We are the controlling. We're the hinge on the door. We're going to control what comes into the school, what's allowed in, and you can see that all over their materials. That is the agenda. We're going to control the public school system.
It's almost like an alternative religion, Pastor Tim,
with
their own deacons and high priests who determine the boundaries of their religion and their orthodoxy and what's allowed in and what's not allowed in. To your point again, we were looking at this earlier, this Cardia goddess, I'll expound more upon what you just said, whose name means door pivot. You said the Roman goddess of door hinges and handles, who prevented evil spirits from crossing thresholds or barriers. Mm-hmm. She was worshipped as the protector of children. Isn't that interesting? Right. So we would read that and maybe come away with a positive view, like the protector of children. Obviously, no small g goddess is any god. It's just there's only Yahweh. But you're that's great, protecting children, especially from evil spirits, and but the left, this is what they do with language. They invert it. Mm-hmm. And this is what the left's been doing for decades. Is they know the power of language to manipulate what they believe is the power to manipulate reality. Right. And so now abortion's reproductive health care and reproductive justice. Now chopping off an 8-year-old's penis because he thinks he's a girl, Pastor Tim. Now, don't you know that's gender affirmation? Right. It's like, whoa, what? A second. Right. And now protecting children is not what we're doing. Right. Oh no, we're the evil spirits, and they're the door hinges preventing us, and they're the barrier preventing the real protectors of children, parents, from getting in and to the schools and getting rid of crazy sexual education that's pornographic. Right.
Oh, yeah.
And now they see themselves as the protectors of children. And this is what they do. This is how they confuse the American public. So follow the science and all of these phrases. Right. This is why it's so confusing for many Americans who aren't as politically woke and aware of what's going on, because it sounds good. It sounds like, a healthy youth act. Right?
Who doesn't want our kids to be healthy?
Now Newsom just signed a bill that you know of, Pastor Tim, said 12-year-olds and older can now charge abortions to their parents' insurance plans without parental consent or knowledge. Right. Again, without parental consent or knowledge. Get those pesky parents out of the way.
Right. Yeah, and I've said this for years now, whoever owns the definition wins the argument. And that's the left is brilliant at owning the definition. That's why when we as Christians talk about these issues, we always have to stop in advance and go, okay, let's define this. Before we move on in our conversation, let's define it and understand what we're talking about.
That's right.
It's not. There's nothing healthy about this act, this Healthy Youth Act. Nothing healthy about it. These things are happening. I can't impress this enough on the parents. This is happening. Yeah. You know, even after we did the FOIA demand, we had all the lists, like all the administrators that signed up, like their signatures on there that they went to the class, and people are saying nobody's doing that in our school district. Like, look. Like for us, we had Temecula, Murrieta, Lake Elsinore, Menifee, San Jacinto, and Hemet. 6 districts were all at this training center. You know, and that's all our Southwest Riverside County. The whole region was going to find out how to do this. And then you talk to them about it, they go, well, we're not doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, you know, Pastor Tim, Judas was awakened, activated, and engaged and animated in serving his father. And while he was, the people of God were sleeping in the garden. And unfortunately, we're still sleeping in the garden. We're very comfy. We're very relaxed with our American liberties and blankets that keep us so cozy and warm and detached from the outside world. While once again, the enemies of God are animated. They're engaged. They're activated in serving their Father, Prince of Demons, Lord of Flies. When he lies, he speaks his native language. And so Scripture tells us that even Satan masquerades as an angel of light. So it should not surprise us that those who serve him do so as well. They masquerade their evil as just righteousness. Or to translate that to today, they masquerade their evil, sexual, bigoted agenda as just science, healthy, human flourishing. Right. And the people of God continue to fold at the one point at which they're needed the most. Right. And we're talking about children, Tim. I mean, children. If we can't protect the children, what are we here for? Right. What are we doing? And does Pastor Tim, share your pastor's heart with us. Does Jesus say anything in Scripture about protecting children, or how he feels when we don't, or when we harm them? Is there anything in the Bible about that?
I've actually let several school board members know about that do what I call fly the banner of Christianity. You know, oh, I'm a Christian, just like, you know, like Joe Biden right now saying I'm a Catholic, like, and he's there with the Pope. Like, well, you know, you're pushing abortion. Stop calling yourself a Catholic. That's right. You know, you're flying this banner of Christianity, so I'm going to hold you accountable as an elected official who says you're a Christian. And I tell them, listen, if you're truly a Christian, number one, Christian men don't let this stuff get taught to kids. Amen. Christian men don't let this happen.
I watched a clip of you say that. Yeah.
And the second thing I let them know is, listen, if you truly are a Christian, then you know what the Word of God says. It is better for you that a millstone be tied around your neck and you to be cast into the sea than to cause one of these little ones to stumble.
Just to stumble.
Just to stumble.
Just to stumble.
Yeah, right.
What you're pushing is not causing children to just stumble.
No.
It's causing them to fall on their face.
It is ruining them.
Oh, yeah. And you know, psychologists are starting to speak out about some of the damage that this sex ed is actually doing to children, that it is actually trauma.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's basically porn that you're exposing them to. What does Scripture say? Don't awaken passion before it's time, or something like this, right?
Right.
It's like, well, you're not just that could be used just to say, like, don't be having premarital sex until it's time. Time meaning that it's not premarital, that you're married. Right. But this is not just like awakening certain like sexual desires. It's like showing them everything.
Right.
And I want to end with this point and then give you a chance to share your pastoral's heart and what we can do. But I want people to understand that these are not just politicians who have good intentions, Tim. They do want what's best for children. But they're just confused. They're mistaken. They're honestly mistaken. And if we can just talk with them, Tim, and share with them the damage that this does to kids, then, you know, maybe they'll change their mind. Because I don't think anyone would have this vindictive and a nasty heart towards children and towards sexualizing them. Some people believe that about some of these actors. Right. And it goes back to what you were saying, actually, Tim, about how many parents had a hard time believing it was true. Because it seems so wicked and out of this sort of their sphere of experience and knowledge, that they're like, how could that be happening? I think we need to understand, and I think we need to articulate that these people know exactly what they're doing, They know it's wicked and they don't care because it enables them to pull off their political goals. Why? Because if you can sexualize people while they're young, it prevents rational thinking. If you can sort of dehumanize people to their most debased animalistic desires, sex, hunger, just like those animalistic desires that need to be tempered by virtue, then it prevents rational thinking. And then you're raised as a sex-crazed young person who just has sex and gets abortions, has sex and gets abortions.
Right.
You're not going to be a thoughtful participant in the American Republic. Furthermore, you'll be able to sell a bunch of abortions. Because if you can sexualize people while they're young, then you have more unwanted pregnancies, way more unborn children that become prospects for abortion that you can make a lot of cash off of.
Right.
I believe that they know what they're doing, and they're doing it intentionally and passionately and excitedly. And here's the last point I'll make to back up that point, that claim. We have laws on the books that do ban this type of pornographic material. We have laws against obscenity. If you were to show some of this curriculum, rip it out. And if you were to rip out some of those pages show them them to a 6-year-old at let's say your neighbor's kid, and you would never do this, but let's say some disgusting, weird, pornographic addicted, child predator showed the pictures to his neighbor's kids. He could actually be sued and taken away as a pornographer and as a child abuser.
Right.
But we have these stupid exemptions for obscenity laws, and our schools in, I think it's over 30 states, have exceptions to the obscenity laws if it's used for
Public education.
Educational purposes.
Right.
So that right there, Pastor Tim, tells me that they already affirm and understand that it's dangerous, because I never hear them speaking out against our obscenity laws. If it was in any other context, it would be wrong, and our laws recognize it. But if you slap the sticker science and education over it, suddenly the trauma related to exposing that to children is taken away. Because why? Because you're in charge now? No, of course not. You know what you're doing, you sicko.
Right.
And, James says, he who knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. So for the pastors who won't stand with you, they are in agreement with this, and they are consenting to what's happening through their refusal to get involved. But let's finish with you just sharing your heart and where you see the church at, and what should we be doing? What can we do?
Yeah, I think if there is any pastors listening right now, and to your entire audience who go to a church, I really want to stress that they need to talk to their pastor about this. And that is that, like I said, God says that we are to pray for all those who are in authority. How is the pastor praying for that person? And do they know that person's name and their struggles and the wisdom that they need, the type of things they have to vote on, the type of pressure they're getting from the public? Get engaged to know who these people are, especially the 5 people on their local school boards, because if they claim to love the children in their congregation, they need to love those kids enough to ensure a healthy school board for them.
Yeah.
That's, if you say you love them and then you just, well, I don't even know who the school board is. Right. Well, do you actually love them then? Ask yourself, do you actually love them? Right. Because to me, it's unacceptable to say as a pastor you love the kids, but you're not really concerned about the school board because that's politics. Yeah, right. Well said. I have a lot of people go, well, Tim, you don't have kids in the school district anymore. My kids are grown. I'm going to be a grandfather in January. I'm looking forward to that. And people are like, well, you don't have kids. Why do you show up? You should just be quiet. You shouldn't even have a say. And I have several things to say about that, but the main point that I make is, how dare you say that? I've got hundreds of children in our children's ministry. Right. And they're all in these schools. Well, not all, a lot of them are coming out of the schools now and doing homeschooling, but I love each and every one of them. Yeah. And I want them in a truly safe environment where they're, to the best of our ability, are going to be away from this type of agenda, away from an adult that will talk to them about this sexual perversion. Yeah. Because what kind of a grown man talks about these things with a child? Yeah. There's a problem there. Yeah.
If you call yourself a shepherd, but you won't protect the sheep, then I guess you're not a shepherd at all.
Right. You're probably a hireling. Yeah. So we need to protect the kids. I say protect the kids at all cost. the enemy that we're dealing with, we got to remember this is a spiritual battle.
That's right.
We're not wrestling against flesh and blood. We got to remember that when we go to these school board meetings, is our fight is not against the people sitting there, it's the spirit behind them.
That's right.
We need to go in prayed up. We need to go in with our spiritual eyes and ears open and watching, because it's almost palpable when you're in there. The spiritual darkness in the public school system, you sit there and watch. It's almost as if these school board members are under a spell.
Yeah.
It is very,
You're right.
very discomforting when you see this happening.
Very
So,
important for the church to realize that we
Yes.
need to lift that spiritual veil
Amen.
and see the spiritual realities before us. Satan's always been behind attacking children and killing children.
Right.
He's actually Molech, shoving children down his throat, right? And he's behind the goddess of pornography, Porneia, right? And because he knows that children are more addicted to pornography right now in this moment in American history than at any other time in world history. And he knows that destroys families and future marriages for millennia. And generational sin is a real thing. So if you can get children captivated by these alternative, goddesses, which is really just Satan, you can destroy a civilization. And Satan's always been behind killing children. But, these pastors who won't contend to protect the sphere in which their children operate, the schools, would suddenly become very animated, Tim, if one of the fathers at the church was abusing his own child in the home.
Right.
So you care enough, whatever, to protect children and create safe environments within the boundaries of his own home. But you won't do that for the boundaries of a city and the school in which he also operates, and in which he also has influences and inputs coming into him that dictate how he'll live and how he'll see the world and how he'll relate to God and his family. So you just care about the certain square footage of bricks in which he sleeps that you will suddenly become engaged with if mom or dad were abusing him, but not if that's happening in a different square footage at the school. What does it matter where it happens or what's it called if the child is still being abused? Because they're under the spell. They're under the spell of the Johnson Amendment, the separation of church and state that Satan has used to silence the pulpits for decades.
Right.
Pastor Tim, you're a warrior, man.
Well, I
Thanks
appreciate
for coming on. I hope that
you.
inspires and activates people. And for you guys listening to this, you need to share this with your pastor, okay? You need to share this with your elders, and you need to have these conversations. Be willing to have those hard conversations and sit down. Show this undercover video. Is it available just in a link online as well?
It's on our YouTube channel.
Great. So we'll put a link to the actual clip itself, so you don't have to fast forward to find in this episode each time. We'll put that link there. We'll put a link to Pastor Tim's program, Our Watch, with Wednesday evenings in Murrieta, as well as their church, 412 Church Murrieta. And share this stuff with your pastor and ask him, one, does he know about it? If he doesn't, now he does. And now what are you going to do about it?
Right.
Are you a shepherd or not? Are you willing to pick up a staff to protect sheep and hit wolves over the head or not? Or are you just a pathetic excuse for a shepherd? Because you care more about your reputation in the community, the tithing of your Democrat congregants, let's call it for what it really is, and the likability of people who differ from you politically. And you'll put that before being perceived as political when really you're contending against these spiritual forces that are attacking children. Right. That's what we're talking about. So, well, brother, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me out.
We'll be praying for you. You keep being an Ezekiel.
All right, will do.
Thank you guys for joining the show today. Head on over to iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. Give the show a rating and review. Let us know what you think. It really helps us reach more people, especially in this Kairos moment that you and I know we need to be unifying the body of Christ to present a united front against the culture of death and their greatest sacrament of abortion, which animates their entire political project. If you want to support this show, go to patreon.com/unaborted. Check out our tiers. You can support the show a little bit a month. It helps us expand our production value, have better guests on the show, be able to fly guests out, and begin producing content on the streets to expose the ideas we talk about on this show to people who have never thought deeply about the abortion issue, so we can change minds, change hearts, and save lives. Go to lovelifecalifornia.org to sign up for our conference in California on January 29th at Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, where we're going to start taking back life in California with the goal of mobilizing a Christian witness outside every abortion center in California by the end of 2022, offering the hope of the gospel and the help of the local church to end abortion in California that would result in a domino effect for righteousness all across the country as we contend against these spiritual principalities and forces that are not just murdering our children, but indoctrinating them with sexual ideologies if they make it outside of the womb alive. We want to see you there on January 29th, lovelifecalifornia.org. Sign up now while tickets are still available. We'll see you next week. I'm Seth Gruber, and this is Unaborted.
Hey! Hey!